Well, there are a number of rights that 16 and 17-year-olds have, which I think ought to give them a right to vote. So, for example, paying tax, joining the armed services, obviously getting married, having children. All of these things, in the end, represent a step forward into adulthood. And I think that being able to vote for the people who make the policies that affect those decisions at that age is something that's really, really important to give to 16 and 17-year-olds. There is inequality in turnout. So if you are older, wealthy and white, then you have a kind of voting inequality of more than 3 times than if you are young, black and poor. And that represents for me a hugely big problem for our society, because it means that those people who are being listened to are the ones who vote. Young people, by not voting, are absenting themselves from being listened to, and that is really, really important, that they actually have a say. In respect to 16 and 17-year-olds, this isn't about just getting more young people voting, because of course they could vote in just the same proportions as those who are now 18 to 25. For me, that is an issue of principle. But it is true that the sooner that you start to vote, the more likely you are to carry on voting into later life. And so for me, that is an important reason for young people to start voting early. If you only see voting as a selfish act, then you probably aren't going to necessarily want to vote, because politicians can't give you everything you want. I think our society is obsessed with individualism, sort of selfishness, and if we keep telling people that politics is all about getting what you want, then I think people will be disappointed and probably won't vote. So what I say is, actually voting is about a collective act. It's about creating the kind of society you want, rather than simply getting something out of politics. It is a duty. If people stop voting, our democracy isn't a democracy, because the whole point of a democracy is that people vote in order to get a government that represents what they want. When people absent themselves from that, essentially you are living in your own dictatorship if you don't vote, because you've had no say whatsoever about the people who are making decisions on your behalf. So yeah, it's about, I guess, young people will start voting if they actually understand that being part of a democracy is fundamental to all of the other things that happen in their lives. I do think that e-voting is something that sooner or later we will have to adopt as a country, because we know that the security features are there, and therefore we ought to be able to do it in a secure way. I don't necessarily think that will be a panacea for increasing voter turnout. It probably will increase it slightly. We know that all postal vote ballots, for example, do increase turnout. So making voting easier does actually help more people to vote. But fundamentally, we want people to be voting because it's a positive thing to do for their society, because actually it can help to change the world really genuinely. If you change a government, you change a lot of policies. You change, for example, education or health spending, or the way in which we send people to war, for example. Those decisions are all taken by politicians, and unless you vote to change governments, then you won't have any say in what they do. I actually think that MPs do a lot to make sure that they consult with young people. Many of them do sixth form and school visits constantly. Actually, I think young people need to organise themselves. It's a bit like, the trade union movement and the organisations of old. When people saw an injustice in society, they didn't wait for other people to sort it out. They got together themselves, raised it with the powers that be, and then changed society. People who are young need to know that they have the agency themselves to make the change they want to see. And if you don't like something that's happening in politics, get together, because when you're together, you're very strong, and politicians will have to listen to you. So partly, I think, youth engagement is about young people forming their own groups about the issues that matter to them. I know that there have been some very successful campaigns when locally students have got together to complain about the cuts in bus subsidies for 16 to 19-year-olds. That got politicians to think again. And it shows the power of young people acting. So my view is, yes, politicians must be open, they must listen to young people, but young people need to put the case for the change they want to see.